The stars had never seemed so distant until the day they arrived. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the landing platform in Geneva, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the alien vessel descend through Earth's atmosphere. The ship was massive, larger than any aircraft carrier humanity had ever built. Its surface gleamed like polished silver, and it made no sound as it lowered itself onto the designated landing zone. Beside Jake, Lieutenant Lisa Hayes adjusted her uniform collar nervously. She had been in combat situations before, had flown missions over hostile territory, but this was different. This was first contact with an alien civilization, and everything about it felt wrong. The aliens had not asked permission to land. They had simply announced their arrival and given coordinates. The ship's landing ramp extended with a hiss of hydraulics. 3 figures emerged, each one taller than any human. The lead alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like blue marble. Its eyes were large and dark, positioned on the sides of its head like a prey animal. Yet there was nothing prey-like about the way it moved. It walked with the confidence of a predator that had never known fear. Behind the lead alien came 2 others of different species. One had scales that shimmered red in the sunlight, with a tail that dragged behind it. The other looked almost humanoid, but with elongated limbs and fingers that seemed to have too many joints. The blue alien approached Jake and Lisa. A small device on its chest began to glow, and a voice emerged, flat and emotionless. "I am Consul Thrain of the Vrelmuth species. I speak for the Galactic Coalition. You are the human representatives." It was not a question. Jake stepped forward and extended his hand, an old human gesture of greeting. Thrain looked at the hand for a long moment, then ignored it completely. Lisa felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Initiative. This is Lieutenant Lisa Hayes. Welcome to Earth." Thrain's large eyes blinked slowly. "Your planet has been observed for 73 of your years. We have studied your species extensively. You are technologically primitive, but show potential in certain areas. The Coalition has decided to extend an offer of membership." Jake exchanged a glance with Lisa. This was not how they had imagined first contact would go. Where was the mutual exchange of culture and knowledge? Where was the diplomacy? "We are honored by your offer," Jake said carefully. "Perhaps we could discuss the terms inside. We have prepared facilities for negotiations." Thrain made a sound that the translator did not interpret. "Negotiations are unnecessary. The terms are standard for species of your development level. You will provide workers and scientists to the Coalition. Your military forces will be disbanded. You will be classified as a protected species under Coalition law. In return, you will receive access to basic medical technology and protection from hostile forces." Lisa stepped forward before Jake could respond. "With respect, Consul Thrain, humanity has questions about these terms. We have our own governments, our own way of life. We would need to understand more before agreeing to disband our military forces." The red-scaled alien behind Thrain made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. Thrain turned one of its eyes toward Lisa, keeping the other on Jake. "Your questions are irrelevant. This is not a negotiation. This is an offer of protection. Without Coalition membership, your species is vulnerable to conquest or extinction. There are forces in the galaxy that would harvest your planet for resources without hesitation. And if we refuse?" Jake asked quietly. Thrain was silent for a moment. "Refusal is not advised. The Coalition maintains order in this region of space. Without our protection, you are alone." The meeting lasted 3 hours. Jake and Lisa were joined by representatives from Earth's major governments, military leaders, and scientists. Thrain and the other aliens showed them holographic displays of the galaxy, pointing out the vast territories controlled by the Coalition. They showed images of other species who had joined willingly and now prospered under coalition rule. They also showed what happened to species who refused. Worlds turned to ash. Civilizations erased. The message was clear. By the end of the day, Earth had no real choice. The coalition fleet numbered in the thousands. Earth had barely managed to establish a small colony on Mars. It would be decades before humanity could defend itself against even a minor alien force, let alone the coalition or whatever other threats existed in space. The treaty was signed 1 month later. Human military forces were officially disbanded, though many personnel were absorbed into civil defense and emergency services. Humanity was granted membership in the Galactic Coalition as a Class 3 civilization, which meant they were permitted to maintain their own government but had limited rights within coalition. Space. Jake watched the ceremony on a screen. From his small apartment in New York, he had resigned his commission the day after the treaty was signed. There was no point in being a soldier when soldiers were no longer needed. Lisa had done the same. They met for coffee in a small cafe near Central Park, both of them wearing civilian clothes that still felt strange. "They think we are weak," Lisa said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "Did you see how they looked at us? Like we were children." Jake nodded. He had seen it. Every alien they had encountered during the treaty process had treated humans with barely concealed contempt, not hatred, which would have at least implied they saw humanity as a threat. No, this was worse. This was pity mixed with dismissal. Humans were weak, fragile, short-lived creatures who needed to be protected from themselves and the universe. "Maybe we are weak," Jake said. "Compared to them, I mean. They have technology that seems like magic. They have ships that can cross the galaxy. They've been spacefaring for thousands of years while we barely made it to our own moon 50 years ago." Lisa shook her head. "Technology does not make them better than us. It just makes them older." Over the following months, humans began to integrate into coalition society. Scientists were recruited to work on various projects, though always under alien supervision. Engineers helped maintain coalition facilities on Earth and other human colonies. Some humans even left Earth entirely, traveling to distant worlds to work in factories or research stations. But they were always the lowest rank, always the least important, always reminded that they were the protected species, the weak ones who needed guidance and supervision. Jake found work as a cargo pilot, flying supplies between Earth and the Mars colony. It was boring work, nothing like his days in the military, but it paid well enough. Lisa became an instructor in a flight academy, teaching young pilots who would never see combat. They stayed in touch, meeting when their schedules allowed. They talked about the old days, about missions they had flown, about the feeling of being part of something important. Now they were just workers in a vast galactic civilization that barely noticed them. 3 years passed. Humans adapted to their new reality. Children grew up learning about the coalition in school, about the dozens of alien species that made up galactic society. Earth prospered in some ways, as alien technology improved medicine and agriculture. But there was always the underlying current of resentment. Humanity had reached for the stars only to find they were not wanted among them. They were tolerated, protected, kept safe like pets in a cage. Jake often looked up at the night sky and wondered what else was out there. The coalition controlled a large portion of the galaxy, but not all of it. There were unexplored regions, unmapped territories, and according to rumors, hostile forces that even the coalition feared. He wondered what would happen if one of those forces ever came to Earth. Would the coalition protect humanity as they promised? Or would humans be left to face the threat alone, unarmed, and unprepared? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The emergency broadcast reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. Jake was in his apartment, drinking coffee and reading the news on his tablet when every screen in the city suddenly switched to the same image. It was Consul Thrain, the same alien who had arrived 3 years ago to offer Earth membership in the Coalition. But Thrain looked different now. There was something in those large, dark eyes that Jake had never seen before. Fear. "This is an emergency announcement to all Coalition members," Thrain's translated voice said. "We are under attack. The hostile force has entered Coalition space through an uncharted spatial anomaly. All civilian vessels are ordered to seek shelter immediately. Military forces are being mobilized." The screen shifted to show footage from a battle. Jake leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. The ships in the video were unlike anything he had seen before. They were angular and dark, covered in what looked like jagged crystal formations. They moved through space with disturbing fluidity, and wherever they went, Coalition ships exploded into fragments. Jake's phone rang. It was Lisa. He answered without taking his eyes off the screen. "Are you watching this?" she asked. "Yeah. What are those things?" "I do not know. But the Coalition is losing. Look at those formations. Their entire fleet doctrine is failing." She was right. Jake had studied Coalition military tactics during his brief time working with them. They fought in organized battle groups, using overwhelming firepower and superior technology. But against these new enemies, none of it seemed to matter. The alien ships moved through Coalition formations like sharks through a school of fish. Over the following weeks, the news grew worse. The invaders were called the Krell, though no one knew where the name came from. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply attacked every Coalition world they encountered, destroying orbital facilities and harvesting resources from the planets below. The Coalition lost 17 planets in the first month. Jake watched the reports with growing concern. Earth was far from the fighting, located in a quiet corner of Coalition space, but that could change. If the Krell continued their advance, eventually they would reach human territory. Lisa called him again 2 months after the first attack. "I am going to Arcturus Station." "What?" "Why?" "They are asking for volunteers. Anyone with military experience. The Coalition is desperate, Jake. They are losing this war." Jake was silent for a moment. "They disbanded our military. They told us we were too weak to fight. I know what they told us. But I also know that I cannot sit here and wait for the Krell to arrive. Are you coming with me or not?" Jake looked around his small apartment. He thought about the last 3 years, working a job that meant nothing, living in a society that treated his entire species as second-class citizens. Then he thought about what would happen if the Krell reached Earth. The aliens had made it clear that humanity was protected under Coalition law. But what good was that protection if the Coalition could not protect itself? "I will pack my things," he said. Arcturus Station was the military headquarters of the Coalition, a massive structure built into an asteroid in a heavily defended system. When Jake and Lisa arrived on a transport ship, they found the station in chaos. Aliens of dozens of species rushed through the corridors. Alarms blared constantly. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. They were processed quickly and sent to a briefing room, where other human volunteers had gathered. Jake recognized some faces from his military days. Others were younger, people who had joined Earth's defense forces after the treaty was signed. There were maybe 200 humans total, a tiny number compared to the millions of Coalition military personnel. A Zentari officer entered the room. Jake had learned to recognize the different alien species during his time working for the Coalition. The Zentari were reptilian, with red scales and multiple rows of sharp teeth. This one wore the insignia of a fleet admiral. "I am Admiral Corvin," the alien said through a translator device. "You are here because the Coalition is losing this war. The Krell are unlike any enemy we have encountered. They do not fear death. They do not retreat. They do not respond to our tactics. In 6 months, they have destroyed or captured 42 coalition worlds. If we cannot stop them, the coalition will fall." The room was silent. Admiral Colvin's 3 eyes swept across the assembled humans. "You are here as volunteers. The coalition did not expect to need human military personnel. Your species was classified as non-combatant. But we are desperate, and you have offered to help. You will be assigned to various ships and stations as support crew." Lisa stood up. "Support crew? Admiral, with respect, we are trained military personnel. Many of us have combat experience." Corvin's eyes focused on her. "Against other humans, perhaps. But you have never faced an enemy like the Crow. You lack the physical strength of most coalition species. Your technology is primitive. You will serve in support roles where you can be useful without risking lives." Jake stood as well. "Then why did you accept our offer to come here?" "Because we need crew to replace our losses," Colvin said bluntly. "The Krell are killing us faster than we can train new personnel. You can maintain equipment, run sensors, handle logistics. That frees our warriors to fight." It was not what any of the humans had hoped to hear, but it was honest. Over the next week, they were assigned to various positions throughout the fleet. Jake and Lisa both ended up on the same ship, a heavy cruiser called the Starfire. The captain was a Krathari named Commander Vex, and he made it clear that he had not wanted humans on his ship. "You will stay out of the way," Vex told them on their first day. "You will follow orders without question, and you will not touch any combat systems without authorization. Is this understood?" Jake and Lisa both nodded. There was no point in arguing. They had no authority here, no rank that the coalition recognized. They were barely above civilian contractors. The Starfire was part of a defensive fleet protecting a world called Helion 4, a major industrial planet with a population of 3 billion. The Krell had been spotted moving in that direction, and Admiral Colvin had ordered every available ship to defend it. Jake worked in the Sensor Operations Center, monitoring long-range scans for any sign of enemy activity. Lisa was assigned to damage control, ready to repair systems if the ship took hits during battle. They rarely saw each other during their shifts, but they met whenever they could in the crew quarters. "This is wrong," Lisa said one evening. "The way they are deploying their forces, the defensive formations. I have been watching their tactical displays. They are setting up to fight the Krull the same way they fought their last war, whatever that was. But the Krull do not fight like a conventional enemy." Jake nodded. He had noticed the same thing. The coalition military was rigid, disciplined, organized. They fought with honor and followed strict rules of engagement. But the Krull did not care about honor. They attacked from unexpected angles, ignored obvious bait, and never retreated even when surrounded. "Have you tried talking to Commander Vex about it?" Jake asked. Lisa laughed bitterly. "He will not listen to me. I am human. What could I possibly know about space warfare?" The Krell arrived at Helion 4 3 days later. Jake was at his station when the sensors lit up with contacts. Dozens of ships, all moving in a loose formation that made no tactical sense. The coalition fleet moved to intercept, their ships forming neat battle lines. Commander Vex stood at the center of the bridge, his 4 eyes watching the tactical display with confidence. "All ships, prepare to engage. Target their lead vessels and fire on my command." The battle was a disaster. The Krell ships ignored the coalition's carefully planned formations. They dove through the defensive lines, targeting seemingly random ships. The coalition forces tried to adjust, but their doctrine was too rigid. They could not adapt quickly enough. The Starfire took 3 hits in the first 10 minutes. Jake watched helplessly as his sensor displays flickered and died. Somewhere below, Lisa and her damage control team were working frantically to keep the ship functional. A Krell vessel appeared on the view screen, heading straight for them. Commander Vex ordered evasive maneuvers, but the Krell ship matched every move. It was going to ram them. Jake looked at his dead console, then at the navigation station where a Vrelnoth officer was struggling to find an escape route. An idea formed in his mind, born from years of flying in Earth's atmosphere, where physics and inertia mattered more than advanced technology. He got up from his station and ran to the navigation console. The Vrelnoth officer looked at him in surprise. "What are you doing?" "Return to your station." "Trust me," Jake said, and pushed the officer aside. He grabbed the controls and fired the thrusters in a pattern that made no sense according to Coalition tactics. The ship spun sideways, its nose dropping below the plane of battle. The Krell vessel, locked onto their previous trajectory, shot past them, missing by less than 100 meters. The bridge was silent. Commander Vex turned to stare at Jake. "What did you just do?" Jake stood up slowly, realizing he had just violated every order he had been given. "I used physics, sir. The Krell ship was locked onto our trajectory. By changing our vector in a way that violated standard combat patterns, I broke their targeting solution." Vex's eyes narrowed. "That was reckless. You could have torn the ship apart with those maneuvers, but I did not." Jake said. Kujake stood in Admiral Corvin's private office aboard the massive flagship Retribution. Through the viewport behind the Admiral, he could see dozens of Coalition warships floating in formation, their hulls still scarred from recent battles. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. How would you fight the Krell? Jake took a breath and stepped closer to the holographic tactical display that dominated the center of the room. "May I, sir?" Corvin gestured with one clawed hand. "Show me." Jake manipulated the controls, pulling up recordings from the recent battle at Helion 4. The Krell fight like machines following a program. They are predictable in their unpredictability. "Watch here." He pointed to a section of the recording. "When your ships formed a standard defensive line, the Krell immediately targeted the gaps between vessels. They did not go for the strongest ships or the command vessels. They went for the geometric weaknesses in your formation. We are aware of their targeting patterns," Corvin said. "We have adjusted our formations accordingly. But that is the problem, sir. You are still thinking in terms of formations. You are still fighting the way the Coalition has always fought. The Krell do not care about your tactics or your honor. They exploit patterns. So the answer is simple. Stop having patterns." Corvin's three eyes blinked slowly. "Chaos is not a military strategy." "It is not chaos," Jake said. "It is controlled unpredictability. On Earth, we spent thousands of years fighting each other. We learned that the best way to defeat an enemy was to make them unable to predict your next move. We used ambush, false retreats, decoys, anything that would give us an advantage. We did not fight with honor. We fought to win." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see the internal struggle on his reptilian features. The Coalition had built its entire civilization on order, rules, and honor. What Jake was suggesting went against everything they believed in. "Your species was classified as non-combatant because you are weak," Corvin said finally. "How can weak tactics defeat a superior enemy?" "Because we are not weak," Lisa's voice came from the doorway. She had entered without either of them noticing. "Permission to speak, Admiral?" Corvin nodded. Lisa walked to the display and stood beside Jake. "You think we are weak because we do not have scales or extra limbs or advanced technology. But humans survived on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We had no natural weapons, no thick skin, no venom. We survived by being smarter than everything that wanted to eat us. We learned to think, to plan, to use our environment as a weapon. That is not weakness, Admiral. That is evolution." Corvin looked between the two humans. Jake could see something shifting in the alien's eyes. Not quite respect, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "You want me to give you a ship," Corvin said. "You want to prove that human tactics can defeat the Krell." "Yes, sir," Jake said. "Give me one ship and a crew willing to follow my orders. If we fail, you have lost nothing. If we succeed, you have a new strategy." The Admiral's teeth showed in a grim smile. "If you fail, I lose a ship and its crew. That is not nothing. But you are right that I have little else to lose. The Coalition is losing this war. We have tried everything we know. Perhaps it is time to try what we do not know." 3 days later, Jake stood on the bridge of the Coalition cruiser Starfire. It was the same ship where he had served under Commander Vex, but now Vex stood beside him as his executive officer. The Cretheri commander had not been happy about the reassignment, but Admiral Corvin had made it clear that this was not optional. "The crew does not trust you," Vex said quietly. "They think you are going to get them killed." "They might be right," Jake admitted. "But we are all going to die anyway if we keep fighting the Krell the way the Coalition has been fighting them." The crew of the Starfire was a mix of species. There were 20 humans who had volunteered to serve under Jake, including Lisa, who now sat at the tactical station. The rest were Coalition personnel. 40 aliens who looked at Jake with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Jake had spent the last 2 days studying everything the Coalition knew about the Krell. Their ships were built from a silicon-based crystalline material that was incredibly strong. They communicated through electromagnetic pulses rather than language. They showed no fear, no hesitation, and no mercy. They were, in every sense, the perfect enemy, which meant they had the perfect weakness. "We have our mission," Jake announced to the crew. "The Krell have established a mining operation in the asteroid field near the Helios system. They are harvesting raw materials to build more ships. Admiral Corvin wants us to disrupt their operations." A Vrelmith officer named Thrace spoke up from the engineering station. "How are we supposed to disrupt them? They have at least 5 warships protecting that mining operation." "We are not going to fight their warships," Jake said. "We are going to make them fight each other." The crew exchanged confused looks. Jake pulled up a holographic display of the asteroid field. The Krell respond to threats with overwhelming force. They do not evaluate whether a threat is real or not. They simply react. So we are going to give them threats that do not exist. Lisa caught on first. "Decoys. We make them think there are targets in the asteroid field where there are not any." "Exactly," Jake said. "We are going to plant sensor beacons throughout the field, each one broadcasting a signature that matches a Coalition warship. The Krell will respond to these signals. They will send their ships to investigate an attack. But there will be nothing there except rocks. And while they are chasing ghosts?" Vex asked. "We hit their real target, the mining facility itself." It was a simple plan, almost too simple. But as Jake watched his crew begin to understand, he saw expressions change. The skepticism did not disappear entirely, but it was joined by something else: curiosity. The mission took 12 hours to prepare. Jake divided the crew into teams, each responsible for a different aspect of the plan. The human volunteers worked on modifying sensor beacons to broadcast false signals. The alien crew prepared the weapon systems and calculated the best approach vectors through the asteroid field. For the first time since arriving at Arcturus Station, Jake felt like a soldier again. Like he had a purpose beyond simply following orders and staying out of the way. They entered the Helios system quietly, their engines running at minimal power to avoid detection. The asteroid field was vast, filled with rocks ranging from the size of cars to the size of cities. Perfect cover for their operation. Lisa took a small team in a shuttle to plant the sensor beacons. It was dangerous work, navigating through the asteroids while avoiding Krell patrols. Jake watched from the bridge, his hands clenched behind his back. If anything happened to Lisa and her team, this entire mission would fail before it even began. 2 hours later, Lisa's voice came through the communication system. All beacons deployed. Returning to the ship, Jake allowed himself to breathe. Activate the beacons on my mark. All hands, prepare for combat operations. The bridge crew moved to their stations with practiced efficiency. Even the skeptical ones seemed caught up in the moment. This was different from anything they had done before. There was no battle line, no formal engagement. They were about to lie to the enemy and hope it worked. Activate beacons now, Jake ordered. Throughout the asteroid field, 24 sensor beacons came to life. Each one broadcast the electromagnetic signature of a coalition warship, as if an entire fleet had just appeared in the system. The Krell response was immediate. Their 5 warships broke from their defensive positions around the mining facility and headed toward the false contacts. Jake watched on the tactical display as they dispersed throughout the field, searching for enemies that did not exist. They took the bait, Lisa said quietly. Now comes the hard part, Jake replied. How? Take us to the mining facility. Maximum stealth. The Starfire glided through the asteroid field, using the rocks as cover. Without their warships protecting it, the Krell mining facility was vulnerable. It was a large structure, built into one of the bigger asteroids, with automated equipment harvesting minerals from the rock. Weapons range in 30 seconds. Reported the tactical officer. Jake studied the facility on his screen. Destroying it would be easy. But that was not enough. He wanted to send a message. Target their power generators and communication arrays, Jake ordered. I want this facility disabled, not destroyed. When the Krell come back and find it offline, I want them to know we were here. The Starfire's weapons lit up the darkness of space. Precise strikes hit the facility's critical systems. Explosions blossomed silently across its surface. In less than 2 minutes, the entire operation went dark. Mining facility is offline, Lisa reported. Detecting power failures across all major systems. Excellent. Now let us leave before they figure out what happened. But as the Starfire turned to retreat, one of the Krell warships appeared from behind a large asteroid. It had not fallen for the decoy. Or perhaps it had investigated one and was returning faster than expected. Krell vessel on intercept course, the sensor officer announced. They have weapons lock. The bridge tensed. This was what everyone had feared. All their clever tactics meant nothing if they could not survive direct combat with a Krell warship. Jake, look. The training facility on Arcturus Station had been empty for years. It was a massive complex built deep inside the asteroid, with simulation chambers, tactical rooms, and combat training areas. The Coalition had not needed it because their military doctrine had been perfected over thousands of years. But now, 3 months after Jake's successful mission at Helios, the facility buzzed with activity again. Admiral Culver had made a decision that shocked the entire Coalition command structure. He had authorized Jake to train Coalition officers in human warfare tactics. Not just a few volunteers, but senior commanders from every major species in the Coalition fleet. The announcement had been met with protests, anger, and in some cases, outright refusal. But Corvin had made it mandatory. Every officer above the rank of captain would attend. Jake stood at the front of the main lecture hall, looking at the assembled aliens. There were over 300 of them, representing dozens of species. Krathari with their multiple arms, Xanthari with their scales and teeth, Roneth with their massive size, and many others he did not recognize. They looked at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed contempt. Lisa stood beside him, along with a dozen other human instructors. They had all volunteered to help with the training program. Behind them, a large holographic display showed various battle scenarios. "Good morning," Jake began. "My name is Captain Jake Morrison. I am human, which means according to Coalition classification, I am weak, primitive, and unsuited for military service. Over the next month, I'm going to teach you how to think like someone who is weak, primitive, and unsuited for military service. Because that is exactly what will keep you alive against the Crow." A Krathri officer in the front row stood up. His name badge identified him as Commander Zun. "This is an insult. We are warriors with centuries of experience. What can a species that has barely left its own planet teach us about warfare?" Jake had expected this. "Commander Zen, you are absolutely right. You have centuries of experience fighting other Coalition species who follow the same rules you do. You fight with honor, in organized formations, following established tactics. The Krell do not care about any of that. They fight to win, using whatever method works. If you want to survive against them, you need to learn to do the same. So you want us to fight without honor?" Zun asked, his 4 eyes narrowing. "I want you to understand that honor is something you can afford when you are winning. Right now, the Coalition is losing. 42 worlds have fallen to the Krell. How many more worlds are you willing to sacrifice for the sake of honor?" The room fell silent. Zun slowly sat back down, his mandibles clicking in what might have been frustration or thought. Lisa stepped forward and activated the holographic display. "Let us start with a simple scenario. A Krell battle group is approaching one of your defended worlds. You have a fleet of 20 ships. The Krell have 30. How do you fight them?" A Vrelnath officer raised one of his elongated hands. "We form a defensive line and concentrate our fire on their lead vessels. We target their command ships to disrupt their coordination. That is what the Coalition has been doing," Lisa said. "And you have been losing. Let me show you what a human would do." She manipulated the display, showing a different approach. Instead of forming a line, the defending ships scattered throughout the system. Some hid behind moons or in asteroid fields. Others positioned themselves along the Krell's most likely approach vector, but stayed hidden. "The Krell respond to threats," Lisa explained. "So, we give them threats that are not real. We place sensor buoys that look like ships. We broadcast false communications. We make them think our forces are spread thin and vulnerable. When they commit to attacking what they think is an easy target, we hit them from unexpected angles." "That is cowardice," another officer said. "That is tactics," Jake replied. "On Earth, we have a saying. It is better to be a living coward than a dead hero. The Krell do not care if you die bravely. They will harvest your planet either way. But if you survive by being clever, you can fight another day." The training continued for weeks. Jake and his team taught the Coalition officers about ambush tactics, false retreats, psychological warfare, and the use of terrain and environment as weapons. They showed them how to exploit the Krell's programmed responses, how to create chaos in their formations, how to make them waste resources chasing ghosts. Some officers adapted quickly. Others struggled with the concepts. Commander Zun was one of the strugglers. He attended every session but always looked uncomfortable, as if the very ideas being presented offended him on a fundamental level. One evening, Jake found Zun in one of the simulation chambers, running through combat scenarios alone. The Krathiri was trying to implement the tactics Jake had taught, but he kept reverting to traditional Coalition formations. "You are thinking too much," Jake said, entering the chamber. Zun looked up, his 4 eyes blinking in surprise. "I am trying to understand your methods, but they feel wrong." Jake pulled up a chair and sat down. "Wrong how?" Dishonorable, cowardly. Everything I was taught about warfare says that you face your enemy directly. You show strength, not weakness. You do not hide or deceive. Can I tell you a story? Jake asked. Ian nodded slowly. When humans first started forming civilizations on Earth, we fought each other constantly. There was a warrior culture called the Spartans. They were famous for being the toughest, bravest fighters in their entire region. They trained from childhood to be perfect warriors. They followed strict codes of honor. They never retreated, never surrendered. They sound admirable, Zin said. They were wiped out, Jake continued, because while they were busy being honorable, their enemies were busy being practical. Other cultures learned to use better tactics, better strategies. They did not care about honor. They cared about winning. Eventually, the Spartans lost everything because they refused to adapt. Zun was quiet for a long moment. You think the coalition is like these Spartans? I think the coalition is facing an enemy that does not care about your honor. And if you do not adapt, you will lose everything. Something changed in Jen's eyes. He turned back to the simulation and started over. This time, his ships did not form perfect lines. They scattered, regrouped, used cover. It was messy and chaotic, but it was effective. The first real test of the new tactics came at the Helios system. The Krell had returned with a fleet of 30 warships, intent on retaking the mining facility Jake had disabled months earlier. Admiral Corvin gave Jake command of a task force to defend the system. 12 ships against 30. By traditional coalition standards, it was suicide, but Jake had no intention of fighting traditionally. His task force included several ships commanded by officers who had completed the training program. Commander Zahn was among them, commanding a heavy cruiser called the Spearpoint. Jake stood on the bridge of the Starfire, watching the tactical display as the Krell fleet entered the system. All ships, execute plan, Broken Arrow. The coalition ships did not form a defensive line. Instead, they activated dozens of sensor decoys placed throughout the system. To the Krell sensors, it appeared that there were not 12 ships but 50. The Krell fleet immediately began to disperse, targeting the various contacts. Phase 2, Jake ordered. All ships, weapons-free on designated targets. The real coalition ships emerged from hiding places behind asteroids and moons. They targeted the isolated Krell vessels, hitting them with concentrated fire before disappearing back into cover. The Krell tried to regroup, but every time they formed up, new false contacts appeared, pulling them in different directions. On the Spearpoint, Commander Jean watched as his weapons tore into a Krell destroyer. The crystalline hull shattered under the assault. For a moment, he felt a surge of something that might have been shame. This was not how a warrior fought. But then he remembered Jake's story about the Spartans. Honor meant nothing to the dead. Target destroyed, his weapons officer reported, moving to next designated contact. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Krell fleet had been decimated. 23 of their 30 ships were destroyed or disabled. The coalition task force had lost only one vessel, and most of its crew had been rescued. Jake watched the last Krell ships retreat through a spatial rift, their perfect formations broken and scattered. Around him, the bridge crew was silent. Then Lisa started to clap. Others joined her, including the alien crew members. Admiral Corvin's face appeared on the main view screen. The Xanthari Admiral's expression was unreadable. Captain Morrison, report to my flagship immediately. Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had won the battle, but he had also violated every principle the coalition military held sacred. Had he gone too far? When he entered Corvin's office an hour later, he found the Admiral standing by the viewport, looking out at the damaged but victorious fleet. Several other high-ranking coalition officers were present, including representatives from the Council. Captain Morrison, Corvin began, still not turning around. You have taught Coalition officers to lie, deceive, and hide from their enemies. You have shown us tactics that our ancestors would have considered beneath contempt. You have changed 10,000 years of military tradition in a matter of months. Jake stood at attention, saying nothing. Corvin finally turned to face him. You have also saved this fleet and this system. The war room aboard the Coalition flagship Retribution had become Jake's second home over the past year. The massive chamber was filled with holographic displays showing the current state of the war. Blue markers indicated Coalition-controlled systems. Red markers showed Krell territory. There was a lot more blue than there had been a year ago, but still too much red. Jake stood at the center of it all, surrounded by his command staff. Lisa was his second-in-command now, promoted to commander after leading 3 successful operations against Krell supply lines. Commander Zahn was there too, having become one of Jake's most trusted officers. The Cretheri had fully embraced human tactics and had proven to be remarkably creative once he stopped worrying about honor. Also present were Admiral Corvin, now Supreme Commander of all Coalition forces, and several representatives from the Council. They had all gathered to discuss the final phase of the war, the offensive that would either end the Krell threat forever or cost the Coalition everything. Intelligence reports indicate the Krell Central Nexus is located here, Jake said, highlighting a system deep in Krell territory. This is the hub that coordinates all Krell operations. It is a massive space station, heavily defended. If we can destroy it, the Krell fleet will lose coordination. Their ships will revert to basic programming, making them much easier to defeat. A Vrelmeth counselor named Senna spoke up. That system is protected by at least 100 Krell warships. Even with our new tactics, an assault would cost us half our fleet. Which is why we are not going to assault it directly, Lisa said. She manipulated the holographic display, showing a different approach. We are going to use the same tactics that have been working for the past year. Deception, misdirection, and making the Krell commit their forces to the wrong places. Over the next hour, they outlined the plan. It was audacious and risky, relying on perfect timing and the Krell's continued inability to adapt to human tactics. But it was their best chance. What about the Nexus itself? Admiral Corvin asked. Even if we clear the defending fleet, that station is massive. Our weapons might not be able to destroy it. We are not going to destroy it from the outside, Jake said. We are going to send a team inside to sabotage its core systems. Once the Nexus is offline, the Krell network will collapse. Who will lead this team? Corvin asked, though from his expression, he already knew the answer. Commander Hayes has volunteered, Jake said. She will take a team of specialists. They will infiltrate the station during the chaos of the battle. Lisa met the Admiral's gaze steadily. We have been studying the Krell for over a year. We understand how they think, how they respond. We can do this. The Council debated for hours, but eventually they approved the operation. They had no better options. The war had been going on for 2 years now. The Coalition had managed to recapture 12 of the worlds taken by the Krell, but the cost had been enormous. If they did not end this war soon, both sides would be too weakened to defend against whatever other threats existed in the galaxy. Preparation for the operation took 3 months. Jake coordinated the movements of over 200 Coalition ships, positioning them for a simultaneous strike on multiple Krell systems. The goal was to make the Krell believe the Coalition was launching a full offensive across their entire territory, forcing them to spread their forces thin. Lisa trained her infiltration team relentlessly. It consisted of 20 individuals, half human and half aliens, who had proven themselves adaptable to human tactics. They practiced on mock-ups of Krell architecture, studied recordings of Krell facilities, and learned to move and think like the enemy. The night before the operation, Jake found Lisa in the observation lounge. She was staring out at the stars, her expression distant. "Having second thoughts?" Jake asked, sitting beside her. "Always," Lisa admitted. "But I am still going. Someone has to, and I have the best chance of success. You know there is a good possibility you will not make it back." "I know. But if we do not try, millions more will die. Maybe billions. The Krell will not stop until they have consumed everything." She looked at him. "You taught the Coalition to fight dirty, to use every advantage. This is me doing the same thing, using the advantage of being small, fast, and unpredictable." Jake wanted to order her to stay, to find someone else for the mission. But he knew she was right. Lisa was one of the best tactical minds in the fleet, and she had proven time and again that she could think on her feet when plans fell apart. "Come back," he said simply. "That is an order." Lisa smiled. "Yes, sir." The operation began at dawn, though dawn was a meaningless concept in space. Jake watched from the Retribution's bridge as Coalition forces simultaneously struck at 15 different Krell systems. The Krell responded exactly as predicted, sending their ships to defend against what they perceived as the primary threats. "Krell forces are moving away from the Nexus system," the tactical officer reported. "Enemy strength in the target area has decreased by 40%. Execute Phase 2. Jake ordered. All strike forces converge on the Nexus. The Coalition fleet that had been hiding in a nearby nebula emerged and jumped to the Nexus system. They arrived to find it defended by 60 Krell warships instead of the 100 that had been there a week ago. Still formidable odds, but manageable with the tactics they had developed. All ships, engage the enemy. Execute Plan Thunderstrike. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Coalition ships darted through the Krell formations, refusing to engage in sustained combat. They hit targets and withdrew, used false sensor readings to draw ships out of position, and coordinated their attacks with a precision that would have been impossible before humans had taught them to think differently. On the spear point, Commander Zun watched his tactical display with satisfaction. His ship had just disabled 2 Krell cruisers using a maneuver Jake had taught him. Lure them close, make them think they have you trapped, then use their own momentum against them. It was not honorable, but it worked. While the battle raged, Lisa's infiltration team approached the Nexus in a captured Krell shuttle. The station was massive, a structure of crystalline material and electromagnetic fields that pulsed with energy. It looked like a giant geometric sculpture, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Approaching Docking Bay 7, reported their pilot, a human named Danny Wright. So far, no alarms. Lisa checked her equipment one more time. They were all wearing modified armor that would protect them from the station's internal defenses. At least in theory. No one had actually tested it against real Krell security systems. The shuttle docked without incident. The Krell automated systems recognized it as one of their own and allowed it to land. The team disembarked quickly, weapons ready. The interior of the Nexus was unlike anything Lisa had ever seen. There were no corridors in the traditional sense, just open spaces filled with pulsing light and geometric patterns. The Krell did not need hallways because they navigated using electromagnetic signals rather than sight. "This way," Lisa said, following the map they had constructed from intelligence data. "The central core should be 3 levels down." They moved through the station, encountering automated defenses that they bypassed or disabled. The Krell had never designed their facilities to defend against internal threats. They had never needed to. Their silicon-based nature meant they did not have internal conflicts or saboteurs. Until now, they reached the central core after 20 minutes of careful navigation. It was a massive chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with light. This was the heart of the Krell network, the intelligence that coordinated their entire invasion. "Plant the charges," Lisa ordered. "We have 10 minutes before the security systems realize we are not supposed to be here." Her team moved quickly, placing explosive devices at key points around the chamber. These were not ordinary explosives. They had been designed specifically to disrupt the electromagnetic patterns that the Krell used for communication and coordination. With 5 minutes left, an alarm suddenly blared. Not a sound, but an electromagnetic pulse that made their armor systems flash warning lights. "They know we are here," Danny said. "We need to leave now." "Charges are not all placed," Lisa replied. "We need 2 more minutes." "We do not have 2 minutes." Lisa looked at the incomplete grid of explosives. If they left now, the charges might not be enough to destroy the core. The Krell network might survive, and this entire operation would be for nothing. She made a decision. "Everyone else, get back to the shuttle. I will finish placing the charges." "Commander, that is a suicide order," one of her team members protested. "It is a necessary order. Go." "That is final." Her team hesitated, then obeyed. Lisa worked alone, placing the final charges as Krell defense systems activated around her. Automated weapons emerged from the walls, targeting her with devastating precision. Her armor took hits, warnings flashing across her helmet display. With the last charge in place, Lisa activated the detonation sequence. 30 seconds. She ran for the exit, but a blast caught her in the back, sending her sprawling. Her armor was failing. Life support systems critical. She dragged herself toward the exit. Every movement agony. 20 seconds. The shuttle would be leaving soon. If she,